No, I won't.
Elizabeth says red. It's red now. Hey, everybody, this is Wayne, and I got Mark helping me, and I've got Deb helping, and we've got Elizabeth that's there on the screen, and we're going to have some fun tonight. This is going to just get into it and let Elizabeth go here in just a second. Elizabeth's a member of the community. A lot of you folks have interacted with her. She's just been incredibly active for the last several weeks. She hasn't really been a member for that long, but has been on Facebook doing all kinds of things. She told me about a topic that was near and dear to her, which was guinea pigs that she's been raising. And I'm going to just stop there, and I'm going to let her go. It's all yours, Elizabeth. Go for it.
All right, thanks a bunch, Wayne. Just a little bit of background on what got this all started was I watched one of Wayne's presentations on his alpacas a week or two ago. And during his presentation, he mentioned the potential for using the alpaca meat as a raw food supply item for dogs. Now, I happen to have some Rhodesian Ridgeback dogs of my own, and I have been feeding them on and off a raw diet for about 16 or 17 years. Not the same dogs. I don't have any that are that old. But I kind of perked up when I heard that, and I got in touch with Wayne, and I told him about an idea that I had for a presentation. And my presentation tonight is going to be on raising guinea pigs, primarily for the raw pet food market, because that's what I've been doing. Well, I'll clarify that in a minute, but I've been raising guinea pigs for about 3 years. I started out with my daughter, raising them as pets, and then we did not intend to actually breed them and raise them. We just had some that we were keeping. Well, she was 3 years old at the time. I had males and females separated, and after a couple of times of her going between the two pens and leaving doors open, all of a sudden we had a lot of pregnant guinea pigs, and so we started having babies. And I got interested in using them myself as raw food for my dogs. And the beauty of, I'll give you a little bit of background here real quick on raw feeding. Typically, what people do is they feed meat and bones. There are different variations of the diet, but one that is pretty typical is to feed in a proportion of 80% meat, 10% organ, well, 80% what they call muscle meat, and then 10% of the diet would be made up of organ meat, and the balance, the remaining 10%, would be made up of bones. The meat tends to be high in phosphorus, the bones are higher in calcium, and so you feed the two together, and that provides a complete diet for the dog. Or it could be any animal. It doesn't necessarily have to be dogs. People raise meat animals and livestock for feeding cats and ferrets and just all kinds of snakes, anything that people keep as pets that are carnivorous or omnivores that need to have some type of meat. So in our case, what happens is if I go to my grocery store or to a local butcher and I bring home a bunch of meat, like typically for me, I go to a meat processor, and last week I brought home, I think, 125 pounds, which was about 40% hearts, and it was all beef. It was beef hearts and beef tongue. And then I had a lot of kidneys and lots and lots of liver, which is great. But then when I go to prepare a meal, I have to weigh it out. I have to cut it up into portions and weigh it out to get the correct proportions for each one of my animals. And how much they get is based upon their weight. They get a percentage of their weight. And so I weigh it out every time I prepare a meal, which for us is twice a day. If I were to feed, there's another variation of the diet which is called a whole prey diet, where you literally feed an entire animal. So with that type of a whole prey diet, obviously you're not going to be feeding large animals like a cow or a deer or anything like that. That would be for smaller animals. A lot of people feed rabbits as whole prey. I feed guinea pigs. I shoot squirrels and feed those to my dogs. We have a little thing called a pocket gopher here, which is about the size of a guinea pig. They burrow under the ground, and they're very destructive in the farm fields. And so we've been trapping them for years, just to get rid of them. And then at one point I said to my husband, why are we getting rid of these things? Let's keep them and throw them in the freezer, freeze them for a few weeks, and then feed those. So those became a part of my dog's diet. But I don't have enough of those. So because with those I'm dependent on what I can go out and trap. And with the guinea pigs, I can raise those indoors year-round with some limitations, but I can raise those year-round. So what I do with those is I don't have to butcher them. I feed them whole. To kill them, I dislocate the necks. There's no blood, there's no cutting, there's no chopping it up into little pieces, there's no skinning. I don't gut them or anything. I dislocate the neck, and then I let the carcasses cool. Then they go into plastic bags and they go in my freezer, and then I bring them out as needed. And when I feed them, typically I just feed the entire carcass. And my dogs eat the hair, the hide, the intestines, every bit of it they eat. And that to me is the ideal diet for a dog, because everything is exactly proportioned. It's what a dog in the wild, or a wild relative of a dog, say a wolf or a coyote, it's the kind of thing that typically makes up the bulk of their diet, along with maybe some small birds, eggs, things like that. And I add all that into my diet as well. But tonight we're just going to talk about the guinea pigs. So if I happen to have an extra large guinea pig and it's too big to feed in one meal, I take the frozen carcass and I take a meat saw and I cut it into whatever size pieces I want for that meal. And then that's how my dogs eat it. So if I cut it in half, then over the course of 2 meals, the dog is going to get the entire animal, all the intestines, all the organs, all the muscle meat, hide, hair, and the whole 9 yards. So that has worked out really well for me. After we had been raising them for about a year, we had quite a few. And so I decided to start trying to raise them to sell to other raw feeders. And that's kind of where I ran into a problem. As Wayne mentioned, I am in Minnesota, and if you're not from the United States, Minnesota is it actually borders Canada, and our farm is about 3 hours from the Canadian border. It gets really cold up here for a very long part of the year. I have learned with the guinea pigs that I can move them from their pens, where I raise them on pasture. I can move them into pens in the barn late in the fall. And so far, I have kept them in the barn until, well after we've had temperatures down to about maybe 15 degrees Fahrenheit at night, with correspondingly low daytime temperatures. I haven't really pushed it beyond that because I think it's starting to get a little bit cold at that point, and I haven't wanted to lose any. I have had a few that have gotten loose that we've never caught, and I put feed and water out for them, and I've noticed that they've been active until well after we've had our first couple of snowfalls. And then this happened 2 years in a row, and I've lost track of them both years. So I'm not exactly sure how long they survive out there, but they definitely don't survive the entire winter. We get temperatures down to 30 and 40 below 0 Fahrenheit, so it's pretty cold here. So the part of the project that has worked really well for me is raising them as grass-fed animals. We have about an acre on our farm. We're on a 239-acre farm, but we have about an acre that we have fenced with a high-tensile electric fence. It's a 7-strand, 7 feet high. It's actually 5 strands, I think, of high tensile and 2 strands of tape. And that pretty much keeps most predators out of that acre. And then within the acre, I keep chickens out there in the summer in chicken moats. And then we have about 2/5 of the space is in our garden and berry plantings, and another 2/5 of it is in some fruit trees, and then the balance is just grass. So I started putting the guinea pigs in pens and grazing them rotationally. I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but if you it's just exactly, if you've read Mark Shepard's book, it's exactly what he talks about with running livestock in a greater area, except that it's in miniature. But it works fabulously well because a guinea pig can survive just on the grass and weeds and things that are out there. And this is all just, it's native grass, native whatever weeds are out there. It's all unimproved pasture. They can survive on that. I like to, because I keep my boars with the sows and they're constantly breeding, I like to supplement with rabbit pellets, a commercial rabbit pellet, which I buy at the feed store, and then I give them hay all the time because they have open-rooted teeth and the teeth never stop growing. So they need something a little harder than the grass and weeds to grind down those teeth and keep them from becoming overgrown. So I do keep pellets out, or I give them pellets once a day. I don't give them free choice, but I'll fill a couple bowls of pellets. I give them water, and then I keep hay out there. And the rest of it, they are eating the grass and whatever other forage is out there, and they do phenomenally well. Now, back when our first sows accidentally got pregnant, having never had guinea pigs before, I went onto the internet, and if you go looking for information on guinea pigs on the internet, what you're going to find is that about 99.9% of the information that is out there is put out by pet guinea pig owners. And they will tell you, if you breed, they say, do not breed your guinea pig, she will die, you will lose the babies, it's a horrible thing, you should never breed them. And it kind of left me wondering how these things reproduce and how the species has remained in existence if they all die when you breed them. But that's what they tell you because they don't want you to breed them. I have found, I have never lost a sow, and we have bred probably hundreds of litters at this point. I have lost 2 baby pups. They're called, the guinea pig babies are called pups. I've lost 2 out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and they were simply small, runty little ones that wouldn't nurse. They must have been underdeveloped or something because they were 2 different litters a year apart, and all of the other guinea pigs in the litter were healthy and survived fine. So it was just some weird thing that we wound up with a couple that didn't make it. But by no means have I had problems breeding. I've kind of come to the conclusion that one of the reasons for that is that I do not keep my guinea pigs in cages. I keep them, when they're outside, I keep them in pens, and so they're running all the time. The smallest pen that I use is 4 feet by 8 feet square, or rectangular, 4 by 8, and about 2 feet high. So the guinea pigs have the ability to run and get a lot of exercise. They're eating a very natural diet. Okay, the pellets aren't that natural, but it's a vegetarian pellet. It's just Timothy hay or grass hay with some other things added in. I don't feed any of the treats that they sell at in the pet stores for them. I don't feed them any nuts or anything that would be really fattening. And I've sort of come to the conclusion, based on anecdotal evidence and my own experience, I think that I kind of think they're like rabbits in that if you let them sit around in a small cage and they don't get exercise and you're feeding them a lot of food that is not really natural for them, or if you're overfeeding them, then I think they get fat. And like rabbits, the fat tends to collect around the reproductive organs. And I think, I'm convinced that that is where people run into problems with them when they keep them as pets in small cages. And I do sometimes sell some of my young guinea pigs as pets, and I write out about a 2-page information packet that I send with them, with the new owners, and I tell them absolutely don't even waste your money buying any of that, those treats that they sell, because they're not healthy for them, and you'll probably run into problems if you do. So I think this is the best way to raise guinea pigs, and it's also very economical to raise them this way. So I spent about 1.5 years trying to raise them commercially, for as raw feeders. And I finally came to the conclusion that in my situation, it's not going to be profitable because I do not have a heated indoor space to keep a large number of these guinea pigs over the winter. So I have to cull a lot of them in the fall, late fall, early winter, and then overwinter my adult breeding stock. And I'm limited. I just have a little greenhouse attached to the south side of my house. Okay, that's a good pen that Deb just popped up there. That would be a great outdoor pen. I don't know what size that is, but yeah. Is everybody else seeing that, or am I just seeing that?
No, everybody's seeing it, and I'm actually taking over, and I'm throwing some up here. Okay. So
yeah, so that's not a bad pen. The only thing that I do differently on mine, and Wayne, maybe you could go and do a Google search for me. Do Grit, G-R-I-T,
okay.
magazine, Grit magazine, chicken tractor.
Okay.
And you will find, and I can point it out when it pops up. I had it up earlier, so it usually pops right up. It's actually one Grit magazine, chicken tractor. Yep.
Do you see it?
No, it hasn't popped up yet. Okay, first one, top left. Okay, pop that one open. This is actually an article that I wrote for Grit magazine 2 years ago. This is a chicken tractor that I designed. It's a 4x8 tractor, and if anybody's interested in a pen to build, they can pop that open, and the plans are actually online. You can get them online, along with some other pictures. Now, the reason I'm showing you this one is because for my guinea pig pens, I make a pen very similar to that, but I only make it 2 feet high. I don't put the nest box in because you don't need it. But what's important and why I want you to look at this is because you'll see that it's closed in. It's solid on one end and wire on the other end. And the reason I do that is to provide shade. Guinea pigs are very heat sensitive. The heat bothers them a lot more than the cold does. You don't even have to pop the whole thing open. Just go up to that first picture. Or up at the top of the page, and you'll... Okay, right there. So you can see the back half of it is solid, and that in this one, the nest box just lifts out, and then you can put a solid panel in to replace it. But if you were doing this for guinea pigs, you would just make a solid back piece because you wouldn't need that nest box. It's open on the bottom. You don't want to put guinea pigs on wire because it can damage their feet. They don't dig like rabbits, so you don't need a bottom because they're not going to get out. And then this particular design has a solid, it's a two 4x4 individual pieces for the top. And the way I built it, when you put it together, the whole thing locks in together and it's rigid, and so you can move it pretty easily. For the guinea pigs, you don't even need the wheels. I put wheels on for the chickens because it's bigger and it has the nest box. It's a little bit heavier. But you don't need that for guinea pigs. But you do need an enclosure that provides some shade because they don't want to be in direct sunlight. They need to be able to get away from the sun. So they have the shade, and then that also keeps them out of the rain if there's bad weather. But it's open enough that it gives them lots of air circulation so that they can breathe. And typically, I would put, I don't know, maybe 14 or anywhere between 14 or 20 guinea pigs in a 4-foot by 8-foot pen, depending on how many are adults and how many are babies. Typically one male because the males will fight, particularly if they're females that come in heat. And you wouldn't think it, but guinea pigs can be extremely vicious and they can do a lot of damage to one another. I had that happen once, and then I've never left my males together since then. But anyway, so I raise them on grass. I supplement with rabbit pellets. If you are researching guinea pigs on the internet and you're looking at pet sites, they will tell you never to feed rabbit pellets because they don't contain all the vitamins and things that are specific to guinea pigs. One of the things that guinea pigs need is vitamin C because they They cannot store it in their bodies, and they cannot manufacture it. So you have to give it to them. They should have some every day. If they're out on grass, they're going to get most of the vitamin C that they need from whatever they're foraging on. So I don't supplement them when they're on grass. When I have them in pens inside, in the barn, or right now in my greenhouse for the winter, I try to give them a minimum of 2 cups of some kind of fresh vegetation, whether it's I use a lot of trimmings from the plants that I grow in my greenhouse. I grow comfrey for them. I had to make a list earlier because I always forget, but I grow geraniums, comfrey. I grow a lot of mint, which the males can have, and pretty much anybody but lactating females. The lactating females cannot have the mint because it tends to cause them to dry up. What else do I grow? Dandelions, salad greens. I have some lemongrass. I give them trimmings from that. I grow a lot of different kinds of herbs. I have strawberries out there. So they can eat all the foliage from those plants, and then they also get any kitchen trimmings from any vegetables that we have. There are a few things I don't give them. I don't give them anything, any broccoli or cabbage or anything that's no iceberg lettuce ever, because that can cause them to bloat. So there are a few things that I don't give them, but there are an awful lot of things that they can eat. And one of my favorites, because I'm also a master composter and I'm into recycling and biorecycling and composting. So a year ago, my daughter was in a preschool in Brainerd, Minnesota, which I know Wayne knows where that is, but it's about 50 miles from our farm. And I was driving her up there 3 days a week, dropping her off, and then I would stay until she got out in the afternoon, and then I would bring her home. So I had a lot of time during the day to run around and just amuse myself, and I wound up getting a deal with one of the big box grocery stores up there to take all of their produce, their waste produce. And I have to be honest with you, I know a lot of people watching this are probably interested in food production and food issues in the world, and I can tell you this, most of what was being thrown away, there was nothing wrong with it, and not only would I eat it, I did eat some of it because there was nothing wrong with it. But what happens is they get shipments in. It's a big box store. They don't place orders. All their orders are done by a central warehouse, and trucks just show up. And when they show up with pallet loads of produce that has to be put out on the floor, the stuff that's on the floor, a lot of that gets pulled and tossed. And so that was how a year ago I was feeding my guinea pigs pretty much unlimited vegetables. And they ate very little pellets, and they did still eat some hay, but they had a lot of fresh stuff, and that was really great. This year, my daughter's not in that preschool now, and so I don't go to Brainerd as often, and I'm not doing that collection of that material. And so I'm having to scramble. I have 31 guinea pigs in the greenhouse right now, some of which are babies, but I'm kind of scrambling a bit to keep them in enough fresh forage without having to go buy it, because I'm really cheap, and I'd rather grow it or feed them whatever scraps I can get. But that is my other limiting factor, is the amount of forage I can grow and the heated space. And the reason that I wanted to do this presentation, though, is because I know that there are a lot of people out there who are looking for projects that can generate some income for their farm, or it doesn't even have to be a farm. You could do this on a city lot or a small acreage if you're in a warm climate, or if you have a heated building, which I don't have. But people could do this. And as far as the market for the guinea pigs right now, periodically I go onto websites that are run by people who supply meat and bones for raw feeders, and I frequently see them. I see guinea pigs listed anywhere from $4.99 US to $9.99 US for a guinea pig. It's all based on size, so anywhere from maybe a half a pound up to 3 pounds, depending on who the vendor is and how they're pricing it. But interestingly, I noticed that there are also a lot of people who raise rodents and rabbits and guinea pigs and things like that for people that keep snakes as pets. And they actually sell the guinea pigs a lot cheaper. So I'm thinking the raw feeding people haven't discovered those websites because they really, I think $9.99 plus shipping for a frozen guinea pig is a pretty good price. And so I think the market is out there, and I have decided that raising them commercially for sale is not going to be really viable for me, because with my 72 and 90-pound dogs, I can't even raise enough right now to keep my own dogs fed because of my limitations here. And I've run the numbers back and forth, and I can't see that I could ever raise enough guinea pigs or anything else to justify putting up a heated building in this climate. And so that's why I haven't done it. But it's I just think it's a great project. The other thing that I do occasionally, I do sell some for pets, and it's not a huge part of my market. Again, we're in a rural area. I know Wayne, in one of his webinars, talked about raising, is it koi, fancy goldfish that you raise, Wayne?
Koi and fancy goldfish, so I sell to pet stores.
Fancy goldfish, and was talking about selling them to pet stores. Well, we don't have a pet store within 100 miles of us, and the two that we do have that are about 100 miles away are they're big box. One is a Petco and one is a PetSmart, and then from there it's another 40 or 50 miles to the next batch of PetSmarts and Petcos. So in my area, raising them to sell to the pet store market for resellers is not really an option. But for somebody who, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Wayne.
No, I was just saying, right, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. But for somebody who lives closer to a more urban or suburban area or in a metroplex area where there are pet stores, or even where there's just a bigger population, because where I sell mine is on Craigslist. I put a free ad up. I take a few pictures of whatever I have that I think would be a good pet. And ours are good pets because my daughter, who's now 5, plays with them for hours and hours and hours every single day. So they're really tame. They're nice pets. And so what I try to do is I try to sell at least enough of them to pay for all of my expenses in raising the entire batch that I raised during the course of a year, so that essentially, other than labor and a little bit of infrastructure, the guinea pigs that I feed my dogs are basically free to me. But it's not something that because usually I wind up having to drive to meet somebody someplace to deliver a guinea pig, because even if we're an hour and a half away, nobody wants to drive here to get them. So when I know that I have a trip to Brainerd or to St. Cloud planned, then I will take some along and meet people and hand them off. But when I do sell them as pets, I charge $25 for a young guinea pig, and that's usually for one that's anywhere from a month to 2 or 3 months old. And I have less than $3 invested in that to get them to that size. So I charge either 25 cents each, or I'm sorry, $25 each U.S., or 2 for I think $45 or maybe $40. I don't remember exactly what I charge, but somewhere between $20 and $25 a piece as pets. So it's lucrative, but again, you have to have the market, and we just don't have it here. But I think there are people that raise them for the for the pet store market, for the retail market. But I don't know of anyone in the country that's raising them on grass the way I do, commercially, because I'm not sure why they don't. I think it's a great way to raise them. If you keep them in a closed pen, I do not have predator problems, but as I mentioned before, I keep mine on the acre that has that high tensile electric fence, and I keep a cover. There's a lid on my pen, so I don't have aerial predators. But I mean, we do have hawks and eagles that, and occasionally I'll lose a free-range chicken to them. We have mink, we have weasels. I mean, we have a little bit of everything out here. So I do have to keep them in a good pen to keep from losing them. But one thing, and Wayne's already seen enough of me popping onto his webinars and asking questions on the Facebook site to know I am definitely a numbers person. And to me, if before I start a project, I run the numbers and I want to know, or at least have a reasonable expectation that I'm going to be able to do it profitably, or there's no point in me doing it. So I don't keep really close records on the cost of raising my guinea pigs now because I'm mainly doing it for my own use. But I did put together a few numbers, and what I came up with was, as far as feeding them, I buy 40-pound bags of rabbit pellets at Fleet Farm, which is a large chain feed store that is in the Midwest. And I buy them usually on sale. I can usually get them for around $11 a bag for 40 pounds. I use $12 here in my example because I don't always get them on sale, but I try to get them on sale when I can. And I also, because I sell some of these, I don't pay sales tax. I have a sales tax exemption for feed and supplies for anything that I'm selling, ultimately. So, but using $12 for the purchase price for a 40-pound bag, it works out that I can raise a guinea pig from birth to 5 months, which is about the age that I like to get them to before I dispatch them for dog food. Costs me under $3 in pellets. Now hay, and I spend virtually nothing on vegetables and things like that for them because I'm able to scavenge it or grow it or use kitchen scraps. I do have some hay cost, which I don't figure because we are on a farm and we cut and bale our own hay. Obviously, there's a cost there, an opportunity cost, as was mentioned in the webinar earlier. That's what that would be. But I don't keep track of that. But a bale of hay lasts me a long time, and I'm very generous with it. And so I don't have figures on that. But in our area, I would sell a 50-pound bale of grass hay for probably $3. So, and I don't go through, if I go through 20 bales a year, that would be a lot for us. So, and obviously my cost is much less than that. And then, oh, actually, I'll take that back. It's going to cost me considerably less than $3 per pig if I'm raising them primarily during the warm months when they're out on pasture, where the cost increases, of course, once they've moved inside and they're just getting a minimal amount of forage and the rest is pellets and hay. So it doesn't cost a lot, and if you can turn around and sell a 5 or 6 month old guinea pig for $7 or $8 or $10, that's not a bad return on investment if you can raise a lot of them. That's the key. And then you have, of course, you have the you have the manure, and I mean, it sounds, if you've never had a guinea pig, you're probably laughing at me right now, but I can tell you, you get a lot of manure from a guinea pig. They can eat 5 times their weight in forage every day if they have access to it, and hay, and that is a lot of fiber. So it's a lot of manure and a lot of urine, and that all, when they're running outside in pens, that all goes right back into the ground. I think it's even better than running large ruminants, say for instance a cow, because with a cow, you get a big cow patty in a plot on the ground, and it's going to take longer for that to break down, and it's going to be concentrated in a smaller area, and you're going to get less of them a day, whereas a guinea pig, their feces, it's a very small little pellet, and they run all around, and they spread them all out, and they spread their urine all out. And then, so if you have a 4x8 pen and you move it once or twice a day, that whole area it's not going to be saturated because obviously you don't want them standing in filth, but it's going to be pretty well covered. And you keep doing that, and you go around and around, and you do a rotation with them, and they're going to be putting a lot of already this digested material right back onto your ground. So yeah, you're not going to take, like in our case, we have 239 acres. We're not going to improve the entire farm with, a few guinea pigs. But in certain areas where, around my fruit trees and around, now that orchard area, we also use it for, when we have chickens, we raise meat birds, we raise them on pasture, and we have those in pens that are running over that same ground. So it's getting improved quite a bit over the course of a season. So I have to mention that because it's not an insignificant advantage to raising guinea pigs on grass. And then let's see. I'm not sure what else I didn't go quite. I thought I had a little more information.
When you're ready, we have a bunch of questions, Elizabeth.
Okay, why don't we start with questions so that I can address those, and then if the other information I have is not covered in the questions, then I will give you a little bit more information on plants and forages and things like that. So how do we do the questions, Wayne? Do I read them or do you read them to me?
No, I'll read them to you. It'll make it really easy.
Okay, go ahead.
So let's start with the very first one we had, which we've had some great ones. I think you've answered this one partially, and it was related to your 4x8 pen. The question was, how many would you raise in there? And you certainly said you didn't want to have more than one male, but I don't know that you said exactly total numbers.
I did, and it kind of varies. It's going to depend a lot on, because with litters and with, the young ones obviously need less space than the larger ones, but I would say probably 12 to 14. If a lot of them are babies, maybe up to 20 in a 4x8 pen.
Okay. Alyssa asks a great question.
Can I interrupt 1 second, Wayne?
Sure.
Let me back up. Let me answer that a little more completely, okay? Typically, with guinea pigs, you want to allow, they say in cage space, a minimum of about 2 square feet per animal. But I find they don't necessarily need 2 square feet per animal if they have a bigger space so that they're running around a lot. But the determining factor is really going to be your forage, okay? Because if you put them out on grass and you start watching them, if you have X number, say you have 15 in a pen, and they go through all the available forage within the pen in 4 hours, then you either need to move the pen more often or you need to cut down the number of guinea pigs that you have. So from a practical aspect, forage is going to be very much a determining factor. But aside from that, I would give them between 1 square foot to 2 square feet per guinea pig, maybe closer to 2 square feet per adult and maybe closer to 1 square foot for the babies.
Okay.
So maybe that's a more complete answer.
Here's one you and I talked about yesterday, and I thought this was very cool that this is anyway, I'll let you answer it. Do guinea pigs burrow?
They do not burrow. I have read that, I read one article that said that they went into burrows, but I'm not even sure that's true. They don't dig. They do not dig, and they like to get inside things, like, so I'll sometimes put a cardboard box out there, or they make little houses that you can get at the pet store. And by the way, I don't buy anything at a pet store. I buy everything used because I'm cheap and I don't like to spend a lot of money on it. But you can buy little guinea pig houses. You can put a piece of PVC pipe or that black flexible hose stuff out there, and they'll go in that. They like to go in because guinea pigs are a prey animal, like rabbits, and so they need to feel safe. And when they get inside things, they feel safer. So they do like to get inside things, but they're not going to burrow and dig holes and go down in the ground to do it.
Ray asked this one. If I get it wrong, Ray, you might correct me, but she says, what type of heat temps, and this was when you were talking about the winter a little bit, and I think she might have meant heat lamps. What are you talking about? So maybe it's heat. Maybe she's asking what temperature range will they tolerate, but maybe she's asking about heat lamps also. So maybe address both of those.
Okay. As far as temperature ranges, and again, if you go on the internet and do a Google search and look for information, what you're going to get is a very narrow range of temperatures, and I kid you not, it's like from 65 to 75 degrees is what they'll tell you. So when I started with guinea pigs, I freaked out, and I thought, they're going to die if it's below 75 or above 85. Or 60, yeah, I think it was 75 to 85. But that's not true, because I've had mine out in the snow. I've had them, the ones that escaped our pens last summer, stayed out until well after our second snowfall. And I would guess, I mean, the temperatures were well below freezing at that point. And obviously they found some place to crawl into where they could, and there was more than one, so if they went in together, they could share their body heat a little bit. But I don't like to leave mine outside when the temperatures get down to freezing. By the time they're freezing, I like to move them inside into an unheated barn. And then I did mention earlier, once we get down to, I kind of play it by ear, but if we're down to 15 or 20 degrees Fahrenheit at night, that's about when I will start moving them in. That's about as long as I've left them outside, because I just don't see, and even that's with a lot of loose hay thrown in piles in the pen. I have a 10-foot by 10-foot pen that I keep them in the barn. So I'll throw half a bale of hay there and just kind of shake it loose, and they can crawl in there together. And if I have 30 or 40 of them in there, they will generate some body heat. The bigger problem is high temperatures, because
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, they don't have a way to regulate their body temperature very well when it comes to heat, and so I don't like to go much above 85 degrees Fahrenheit with them. In my greenhouse, which I call it a greenhouse, but it's kind of a sunroom / greenhouse. It's on the south side of our house. It's attached to the house, and it's wood frame with glass windows across the south end, and then we just have skylights in the ceiling, so it's not even a glass or a clear ceiling. And even with that, in the wintertime, the temperatures can reach 98 degrees in there easily, and that's even with venting some of that off. We get some solar heat for the house out of that as well. So even with that, it'll get up to 98 degrees, and I have to open windows in there to keep it cool enough for the guinea pigs. The other thing I have to do is I have to situate their pens either at floor level or close enough to the floor, because we have a little knee wall that's about, I don't know, 2 or 2.5 feet high. I have to keep them low enough that they get shade from that, so that they're not in direct sun. If they're in direct sun, I think even 85 degrees Fahrenheit would be too hot for them, especially the ones with darker colored coats. Okay. So yeah, the heat is more of an issue than the cold is, I think.
How long is their gestation period, and how big is the average litter size? Nick asked this.
Okay, Nick, the litter size varies, and in my experience, what I've noticed is that when the guinea pigs are very young, when the sows are young, they tend to have smaller litters in terms of the number of babies, and then as they get older, the size of the litter increases. I would say for sows that are between 4 months of age and a year, my average litter size is probably 3 to 4 babies. I had one last year that only had one, and I never figured out why, because she wasn't a young one, she was an older one, and she'd had several large litters. I don't know why. It was a fluke. It hasn't happened since, but I did have one. Sometimes with the young ones I'll have 2, but a minimum of 3 to 4 is about average. And then as they get a little bit older and bigger, because they're still growing during all this time, my largest litter I think was 7, and among the sows that are over a year old, I'd say 5 is about average, 5 or 6. And the gestation averages about 63 to 65 days, and it can, I looked this up on a website earlier, they say 59 days to 68 days, but most of mine tend to run 62 to 63 to 65 days, and again, it's sort of like the larger the litter, the shorter the gestation. And for the sows that are carrying smaller litters, they tend to go a little bit longer. But about 62 or 63 days is about average. Now, I'll just tell you, since you asked about that, I'll just carry on that thread for a second. Because a lot of people try to compare guinea pigs to rabbits in terms of production. And when a guinea pig baby is born, it is born with eyes open. The eyes actually open several days before the litter is born while they're inside the mother. They have all their hair, their eyes are open, they can hear, and they come out, and I mean almost immediately, or certainly within an hour, they're up and running around. And the mothers will typically nurse for 3 to 4 weeks, but they don't have very much milk, and the milk is not very nutritious, and the guinea pig babies can actually start eating food within a day. Of being born. We had a situation earlier this fall. It's kind of tragic, but we have a visiting Ridgeback with us who's here to be bred to my male. And really nice dog, but she's got a high prey drive, and she has not been around little animals. And some little 5-year-old left the door to the barn open one day, and that dog got in and hopped in the pen, and within about a minute and a half killed 17 of our guinea pigs. And so it happened right after almost every one of them had a litter. So I was really nervous because it was mostly the older ones that got killed, the mothers. And I thought, oh, we're going to lose all these babies now. And we didn't lose a one. We did not lose one. They can survive once they're eating. They can survive without their mother's milk. You don't have to. On the pet pages, they'll tell you that you have to hand rear them and bottle feed them and all this, but I didn't with any of them. Although, having said that, they are herd animals, and I have seen some sows nursing babies that were not their own. And I suspect that may have happened in this case, is that some of the mothers that weren't killed may have been taking turns feeding some of those other babies. And I think it's hard to tell because, honestly, we were at our National Specialty Dog Show when 6 or 7 of those litters were born, and by the time we got back and they were 4 or 5 days old, I have no idea which babies belong to which mothers. So I can't really tell, but I think maybe that batch of 7 or 8 litters may have grown a little more slowly than normal, but I couldn't even swear to that because I don't pull them out and weigh them or anything. That was just sort of my observation. But so yeah, they don't have to. They do nurse. They'll nurse until they're about 3 or 4 weeks old. Another thing I'll mention, because I'm thinking about it right now, the males can theoretically breed when they are 3 weeks old. So I typically pull the males out when they're 3 weeks old, and then I like to leave the females in longer so that they can, if they want to do any extra nursing, if the mothers still have milk, they can keep nursing until the mothers wean them. Because typically I try to either sell the males or I use them for my raw feeding, and I try to keep more of the females for more breeding stock. So that's kind of how I do that.
This is going to be one of the really stupid questions, but is sexing relatively easy? I mean, I'm assuming they're...
Boy, it should be. It really should be, and I know how to sex them, but I have missed males. I've missed male babies and had them breed the females back before when I thought I had found them all. So, I mean, you flip them over, you look at them, they have a penis. It's definitely distinguishable from the sex organs of the females, but I think sometimes because they're really, if you try to sex them when they're really small, I think sometimes you can't tell. I know you can't because I missed one and I thought I was pretty good at sexing them. But yeah.
A couple more. Keep asking questions if you have them. We've got about 10 minutes left. So, what about freeze drying? Have you ever heard of anybody doing that with them?
I haven't heard of it. It's not something I've looked into. So no, I haven't. I mean, you can freeze dry any kind of meat. I'm just not sure why you would. And I think if you did try to freeze dry them, I'm sure they'd have to be butchered. I don't think you could actually freeze dry an entire carcass, but I'm not sure because I don't really know anything about freeze drying.
Well, and you saw I was showing some slides that clearly they are becoming a human food item. So for folks, so
Yes.
maybe from that perspective, they would be something. And I showed a couple of even some prepared. So
I know that in where I live, down in the Twin Cities, I don't live there, but it's 3 hours drive from me. There is a large population of Ecuadorians and Peruvians and other South American people, and so they do eat guinea pig. And the reason I know this is because several years ago there was a big street festival down there with a lot of these. I'm not sure which ethnic groups were involved, but I know somebody was serving a lot of guinea pig from little food carts along the street because I think it was 180 people or 80 or 180 people or something got sick. They got food poisoning from eating these guinea pigs, and it was a huge thing. It was all in the news. And so it wasn't the guinea pig. I mean, I've eaten guinea pig in Peru. I've tasted it, sampled it. I don't have a huge desire to eat it, but my guess is that it was not, I mean, it's perfectly safe to eat, so whatever it was that caused this illness was, it wasn't stored properly or refrigerated properly or it wasn't cooked enough or something.
Yeah.
But I was amazed that there were that many people down there that were eating guinea pig at the street.
I got to ask this, but David asked it before me, so I'm going to give him credit.
Okay.
What do they taste like? Because you said you'd had them.
Boy, it doesn't taste like chicken, I can tell you that.
Does it? Okay. Everybody always says it tastes like chicken. So you said
when I had it, it was in a restaurant in Lima, and the way they cook them different ways, but one of the ways they cook them is they basically split the carcass down the chest, down the ribs, and they kind of butterfly it, they lay it out, and then they cook the whole thing over an open fire or they bake it. And so it's very like barbecued, and the skin is really tough, and then the meat inside is a little more tender. I couldn't really tell you. It's very chewy, and I can't really tell you what it tastes like, just because I can't really compare it to anything. It's not a red meat. It is kind of a red meat, but not like a beef steak or anything like that. I don't know. It's not bad, but I was kind of put off. This was obviously many years before I started raising guinea pigs, and I was put off by the whole idea of eating a little pet furry thing, which is what I had always regarded guinea pigs as up to that time. So I wasn't wasn't something I had a lot of enthusiasm for. But in a pinch, and I mentioned this to you, Wayne, that they're a great thing to have on hand for if anybody's into prepping or self-sufficiency, if you live off-grid, you don't have refrigeration, you need to have your meat, and this is a lot of the reason why they're so popular in South American countries is because one or two of them is going to feed a family. Actually, they have a variety that gets a little bit bigger, so it might take more than two for an average American or North American family or European family. But you take however many animals you need, you prepare them, you eat them, and boom, you're done. No leftovers, so you don't have to refrigerate it.
Yeah. David, we did talk about dehydration before, just that she hadn't done it because, and why would you do it for the pet perspective? Because you're just going to freeze them. Let's talk about that one just a little bit. Somebody did ask first, how many dogs? I think they meant you said the question was how many dogs do you feed? And I think you didn't even say how many you have. You have 4 or 5, I think.
No, well, right now.
Yesterday, how much do you feed to an individual dog? So talk about that.
Okay. So we have Rhodesian Ridgebacks, which is a hound. They're a large dog. My female weighs about 72 pounds, and my male is about 90 pounds. And the way you calculate the food is generally it's between 2 to 3% of their body weight. Or their desired body weight, because actually my female is a little fat right now, so I'm feeding her more down towards the 2% of her body weight, and the male is getting about 3% of his body weight. And then we have a female, this bitch that is visiting from Texas to get bred. She's actually gotten a little thin. I think the cold weather, which she's not used to, I think she's burning up a lot of calories. So she's actually getting about 3.5% of her body weight. So I would just weigh a carcass. I don't have the figures in front of me, but I think for my male, at 2%, I could do the math, but I think it's about 1.85 pounds per day, and I divide that into 2 meals because my dogs eat twice a day. So about, what, 0.9 something, 0.9 pounds per meal, and that includes meat, bone, everything.
And you might have said this, but how much would your 5-month-old that you're going to be using, how much would they weigh, full body?
Oh, it'd be nice if they'd weigh about a pound or a little over a pound, maybe 1.2 or 1.3 or 4. The boars, the males are going to weigh a little bit more, and the females are going to weigh a little bit less. So it depends on what sex of guinea pig you're weighing, but definitely about at least a pound at that age. And then if you want a larger one, you just let it get a little bit bigger. But that's about the minimum. About 5 months is about the minimum that I would start processing them for.
So I'm going to ask a question. Deb, are you on here now? We used to own a pet store, Elizabeth, and I don't remember who she would buy her guinea pigs from. Do you remember who you got your guinea pigs from?
I don't remember where I got much of anything.
It was a few years ago. And this was, we had a neighborhood pet store. I'm going to tell you, I remember a little. Elizabeth, she didn't buy them from some supplier. And actually, if you saw me, I did a little bit of a search and said something like guinea pig puppy mills.
Okay.
I think a lot of ma and pa pet stores, which is who I sell the fish to, by the way. I don't sell them to big boxes. And I think I said when I talked about it, within 100 miles of me, there's about 20 of those. And, when I'm selling, you'd be able to, if you're selling them to the retail for 25, there's about a doubling rule of thumb. So you should be able to probably sell them at wholesale to a pet store for 12 and a half, let's say, something like that. That's a little less than what I'm selling fish for. So I'm selling my fish for $20 to $30, $40, $50 sometimes. And they love it because they can't find them otherwise. And I'm guessing a lot of the pet stores get moms that kid had a female that had a litter of 4 or 5, and the moms say, you know what, we don't need these, and they bring them in. I bet you bought a bunch of them that way, Deb.
I've heard of that happening a lot. Reading guinea pig forums and stuff. I think that does happen a lot. I think you're right because, I don't know how many guinea pigs you would typically sell in a month, but I doubt you sell 100 guinea pigs. Maybe you sell 6 or 8 or 10 if you're lucky, right? So it's not a huge volume thing if you're a mom and pop pet store. So in that case, you're probably
genetic? Is the color patterning genetic at all?
I think it is, but I don't know a whole lot about that. Because what I wind up doing with mine is, and I have a whole range of different colors and hair types and things like that. And so what I do to keep from getting too inbred is every now and again I'll just go out and get a new boar, and I'll get rid of the old boar, and then I'll use the new boar for a while. So I wind up switching them in and out a lot. So sometimes I see patterns where a sow will have, a bunch of babies and every one of them looks just like her. And then I have other litters where they all look totally different. But I don't have any particular type or breed, and there are breeds and varieties of guinea pigs. People show them at the rabbit shows. A lot of times they'll have a cavy judge is what they're called cavies. So they'll have classes for that. And so there are very distinct breeds and different varieties within the breeds. I just don't know a lot about that in mine because mine all came from pet homes originally. Like you were saying, somebody would have a litter and sell the extras. And that's how I got started with the ones that we have. So I just have a mishmash of genetics, and it is whatever I've got.
Well, again, I want to be respectful to you and also to all of our attendees. I've got 2 more questions here. Both from Ray, both good ones. They would have been mine too. I'd have 100 more. So sometime Elizabeth and I are going to talk, and I'll get a whole bunch more questions into her. But and by the way, before we do that, would you guys throw in some ones and clapping if you think that Elizabeth did a nice job here? I think this was great. But here's the 2 questions. how old can they breed to? So how, and that maybe that's both for males or females. And then how old is an old guinea pig, just generally?
Okay. As far as the age of an old guinea pig, I have seen this when I was researching them, and I can't remember, but it seems to me that 6 or 7 years old would be pretty old. I think that's about 6, 7, 8 years old is about the lifespan, and that's pretty long for a guinea pig. I think 5 years is about average for a pet guinea pig. As far as breeding, I think you can breed them until they're 5, 6 years old, but I haven't had any long enough to actually know that through my own experience. But if they're healthy, and the other thing I didn't mention is when you can breed them, I think up to about 5 times a year, because the females come into heat immediately within a day after they have a litter. But I like to give mine a month off because I don't want them pregnant while they're lactating. So what I tend to do is separate the pregnant females before they have their litters, and then they have the litters, and then I pull all the males out, hopefully before they're old enough to start breeding the mothers, and then I'll give the females a month before I put them in back in with the males. And so by doing that, I think I get like 4 litters a year out of a female, and I think that's quite a lot. But so I wouldn't really expect to be able to breed one for more than 4 or 5 years. And they start. The females can be bred at 3 months. I like to wait until mine are 4 months, so they've got a little more growth because they're not full grown at 3 months. They really aren't full grown until maybe 5 or 6 months or 7 months even. But 4 months seems to be a good time, especially because they tend to have those smaller litters. And mine are very well fed, so I don't worry about it being too taxing on them.
Elizabeth, we're right at the bottom, so I'm going to be respectful to you. There's no other questions. Can I ask you a favor, though?
Yep.
I would love for you to think about coming back sometime in the future, doing another segment with us on the other side of this, which is you just barely touched on it, which is why is it a good idea to be feeding raw diets to our pets, to these animals, and to dogs in particular? Okay. And there's a whole, I know you probably have a lot of information about that. So yeah, and
I'd be happy to do that because I think that, it's not only good information for people who have pets that they might think about feeding raw, but it's also a huge potential market. And you and I talked about this on the phone, and I told you some of the prices that people are getting, and they're shipping meat frozen, and people are paying what I think are exorbitant prices, and then they're paying shipping on top of that. And it's really expensive, and there's a big market out there, and it could be great for somebody.
I call out a couple of people that are here right now, and you've actually corresponded with them, and they're some of our regulars. That's Alyssa and Ray. You guys ought to be thinking about these, and you particularly, Ray, as you're just getting going with your farm right now. She's in Missouri, so I would think she could easily be doing on a year-round basis. So
yeah, and
she may have to worry about the summer heat actually, because it'll get into the 90s with humidity and so on. So
well, you give shade and you can put water, and they'll go in the water. But I'll tell you this, Wayne, because it is hard to cover everything in the amount of time, and I don't want to run over here, but I will say that I think everybody who's watching this is on the Facebook page, correct?
Yep.
So by all means, shoot questions on there if you have questions, because I do read that I'm on that group and I read that page. I usually check it every day. So I'm happy to answer any more specific questions that anybody has. And yeah, if there's interest, I'd be happy to come back and talk more about raw feeding.
Yeah, I just think some point that could be really cool. Maybe we even have a couple of other people that have experience with it and so on. Well, all right, everybody. Thank you so much. Everybody hung out here. You guys are, this was a great one. Everybody stuck around, and you guys, they gave you a bunch of hurrahs, which I'm doing here now too. Tomorrow, just quickly, tomorrow we've got 3 sessions. We've got Mark Shepard finishing up the day. We've got Evan Folds doing his first time with soil fertility and bioenergetics. That's really right before Mark. So if you haven't registered for that, you might want to go think about that. And it's on your announcements to be able to find where it is. And then, I was wrong. I think it's 2 tomorrow. And then 2 on Thursday. If I'm wrong, somebody will have to correct me, but I think it's 2. And Elizabeth, is thanks so much, and we'll talk, I'm sure, through Facebook and other things, and we'll probably be raising a few guinea pigs at some point.
I hope so. And thanks for having me, Wayne, and thanks to everybody for stopping in tonight.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.